This Hangout on Air is live. Sorry for the short delay, some technical difficulties, but the show must go on. And the show is always good here on Sunday mornings with Dr. Gene Bramall and Matt Waldman. And I do want to remind everybody that this week, records being taken down all over the league. You can take down some records in daily fantasy football, free daily fantasy football. This week, you can prove your mettle thanks to our partnership with DraftKings. Play for free for a share of $1 million with the first deposit of $5 or more. First place wins $100,000 alone. Just draft a full lineup of players and watch your team shoot up the leaderboard. Make sure you get all your picks in by 1 p.m. Eastern, about 3 hours. Deadline today, Sunday, October 14th. To participate, go to dkng.co/footballguys. Draft your lineup, dkng.co/footballguys. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for more details. Gene, hide the children. Brock Osweiler is going to face Chicago. What? I didn't know. I know it's Halloween season. We're going to get a horror movie today, a slasher flick.
I got a tweet from somebody that said it's Brocktober.
Yeah. Ooh, nice. Well played.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. This is one of those situations where there's probably going to be just a ton of fire where there's actually smoke. Chris Kaufman, who does a really good job on the Dolphins beat, has a lot of good information up on his Twitter timeline over the past couple of days about just looking at Tannehill's throwing velocity and inconsistency. And he's kind of reporting this as an AC sprain of the throwing shoulder, which caused a lot of bit of soreness as he kind of comes back and throws. And now there's been some reports by Doug Gottlieb, who's going to be the sideline reporter today, who's had some access to the team, suggesting that Osweiler took all of the first team reps on Friday, that they're hoping to warm Tannehill up, but they're not very optimistic. You just don't see anything changing between now and inactives in an hour and a half here. So I think we prepare for Tannehill to be inactive and hope you get the best Osweiler you can get.
And Matt, does this make, I know coming out of the bye, we had some tough Jordan Howard decisions. Does this make it easier to play Jordan Howard on the idea of a game script that sets up the Bears to be nursing the lead in the second half if we weren't already expecting that on the road?
I think in one sense and one conventional thought, yeah, that makes sense. But then you have to consider that 2 weeks ago, the Chicago Bears looked like the Kansas City Chiefs throwing all over the field against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were hurt, and then stuck the dagger in them and just kept going that route. So if I were Matt Nagy and I had Mitchell Trubisky and all of these weapons around him that I'm trying to get going, I would probably be ignoring Jordan Howard every chance I could get to try and make sure and throw this ball all over the yard and get some confidence up against a weakened opponent. But who knows? I'm not an NFL coach, and obviously, the conventional idea is, yeah, Jordan Howard in the fourth quarter, that should be nice. It would be helpful carries. But I think when you think of the context of what happened 2 weeks ago, it's not as safe as a looking play as it may seem.
It could definitely still be a lot of Tariq Cohen as the offense really came together whenever Cohen was featured 2 weeks ago. Gene, Aaron Rodgers, we had Dr. David Chow doing tremendous work isolating the setback, confirmation of the setback, but practice participation didn't seem to indicate a true setback, at least in terms of his ability to participate in practice. Does that mean we shouldn't assume him to be compromised tomorrow night?
I don't think I'd worry too much about Aaron Rodgers now that we've seen him play through the injury for a couple of weeks. And 2 weeks ago, he looked really good, wasn't concerned at all. Maybe a little bit of setbacks and pain this week, not practicing as much. But when we were at the highest level of concern with Rodgers was when he wasn't really practicing with his teammates, and he had some concern about his offensive line and his wide receivers being banged up. But he looked pretty good in the second half after going in. You feel like maybe a cool down, the knee stiffens up a little bit. You have to change braces. That didn't really happen last week. Now, he may not be, twirling around in the pocket and climbing the pocket and doing a lot more scrambling as he was in week 4. But I don't think we have to be too concerned about his ability to connect with passes downfield.
And we have a lot to talk about on this Monday night game with Eugene, because I love saying the name Marquez Valdez-Scantling. It just rolls off the tongue. Not quite like Kiki Cutie, but almost. Are the Monday night crew, are they going to get to be saying that name? What more do we know, or are we still in the holding pattern with Geronimo Allison and Randall Cobb?
I feel like there was a lot of optimism on Wednesday when they were both doing more on the practice field than maybe was expected of them. They were said to be on the rehab field, and not only did that not occur, but they were even doing some 11-on-11 reps. And there wasn't any decrease in practice participation as the week went along, which I think are all good signs. Now, Mike McCarthy said we're going to go all the way up to game time to make sure that they're okay and that there aren't any setbacks, but both of them are going to be on the team flight out to San Francisco. I would expect both of them to play. They are still both within the window of re-aggravation risk, but I think it's likely that they're going to start. But the question for you guys is going to be, has Valdez-Scantling done enough to start to work in and get some snaps as we go a little bit?
And what about poor souls that might have to rely on, like myself, Alfred Morris, or anybody relying on any part of the San Francisco offense? Who's CJ Beathard going to throw to? Is George Kittle going to be okay? I mean,
Yes.
Is there anybody in San Francisco we don't talk about this week?
I think even though they listed him questionable, I think George Kittle is likely the most. I don't think you have to have any concern about him. We've seen him on the injury report before, limited through the end of the week last year, this year, and he's done fine. I haven't seen anything to suggest otherwise. I was a little bit surprised that Pierre Garçon did a little bit more in practice Friday into Saturday, and he's listed questionable. I'm still a little bit nervous about him being able to do what he needs to do on the field. I know there's been some lack of clarity reports on what's going on with Matt Breida. I still think every indication suggests that it's a high ankle sprain. It may not be as high grade as kind of what it looked like, because it was a fairly violent mechanism, and I still think it's likely that he doesn't play this week, but he's at least given himself a chance. No Dante Pettis, probably no Trent Taylor. So we'll see how things progress from there. But the one I think is the true game time decision is probably Garçon. I think Kittle's going to be fine, and I think we're just going to have to wait and maybe hear a little bit of something about Breida, but I wouldn't be counting on him.
So, Matt, and we'll get to the meat and potatoes of week 6 analysis, but I'm really, really excited. And all my heart goes out to all the injured players, including Trent Taylor and his back issue, which was an issue in the preseason. But I think that means Richie James. Is this a name? Because we like to go deep. We didn't get a chance to talk about him Thursday night. Now that the Trent Taylor outlook is dim, how bright could it be for Richie James enough that we will care about him in fantasy leagues this year?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think that if he's going to have an expanded role, and it sounds like that's the expectation, then yeah, he can give you that opportunity, because one of the greatest strengths of this receiving class was the slot position. And I think that's what people underestimated when they said, oh, it's, when they talked about this class, it wasn't so great. Well, yeah, if your idea of a wide receiver is 6'5", AJ Green, Julio Jones type of receiver, one position out of the 3, then yeah, it wasn't a very good class. If your idea is that you'd like a complete receiver who can play outside and inside and be a little bit undersized by that standard, then this was a very rich class. And I think Richie James is a guy that, he very much, when you looked at his skills at Memphis, not Memphis, at Middle Tennessee State, you saw a player who had a lot of similarities of usage to Antonio Brown. And the way that he was used, as a runner and as a receiver, he was used on a lot of deeper routes in terms of corner routes, seam routes. He made a lot of tight plays in traffic. He was a tough player with excellent vision, and he's played well throughout the entire year. It's just that his draft stock and draft capital was low. So, but this was a guy who spent a lot of his offseason working out with Patrick Mahomes. He's a skilled player, kind of known around the league on that level as being a skilled guy. And he made some nice plays in the red zone. I wouldn't be surprised at all if, with some good performances, that we see Trent Taylor kind of go the way of the dodo, by the end of this year. I mean, he's that kind of player. So it's kind of a watch and wait thing to see how he does in terms of, working with CJ Beathard and how expanded that role might be. But I'd say if you're in a desperation bye week situation and you're looking at guys like Maurice Harris, or you're looking at Alan Hearns or somebody like that, Richie James might not be a bad option to look at, because expanded role could mean, oh, we're going to use him in the slot, meaning he might get 6-7 targets and 3 to 5 of them, and maybe one in the red zone.
Yeah, dare I submit, we've been talking a lot about satellite backs. And we've talked a lot about Kiki Cutie, and we may be talking a lot about Richie James. I understand why you said Memphis, because Anthony Miller, Richie James, some overlap there.
And Kiki QT, there's a bunch of
Right.
overlap. I mean, everyone was saying all these guys were the next Antonio Brown. And to me, the guy who was the truest guy that you would put in the comparison, the way that people did those comparisons, which are flawed, but I thought Richie James came out closer to that than anybody else in this class.
And it was more of a Thursday night topic, but you can see these things converging where, because of the spread passing games, because of the high percentage passing games, that satellite backs and versatile receivers who can line up in the backfield and add run after catch value are converging into one position that's going to be very rich for PPR leagues, because offenses are going to take advantage of the skill sets of those players. And I think Richie James fits. As we go on, Gene, I saw something about Deshaun Watson that made me pause and made me think, well, okay, maybe you're fine to play your Texans this week, but going forward, lung. I don't ever like to see any internal organs mentioned when it comes to injuries. Should that have caused me pause, or is this a Dr. Gene Xanax calm down moment?
No, I think, yeah, that was the first that was heard of kind of overnight. Ian Rappaport mentioned lung issue as well. And, when you see the team doctors listening for breath sounds on the sidelines, that's what they're concerned about, that there's some sort of chest wall contusion that might be significant enough to affect the lungs. And that was probably because he was having symptoms, be it chest pain, be it a little bit of difficulty breathing, some chest tightness, what have you. Everything's been pretty positive through the week. Watson said he felt good, not even good, but great on Wednesday. His backup, Brandon Weeden, said he was throwing the ball a little bit better as the week went along. And Bill O'Brien said his mobility had improved by Friday. And there doesn't seem to be any indication that he's not going to start. There's no kind of late, Friday into Sunday concern like we're seeing with Ryan Tannehill and others. So I think he's going to wear a lot of extra padding. Hopefully he makes some better decisions outside the pocket today, where he's not taking such hard hits as he did last time. I know that's part of the game, and I know that's what you want him to do, to be competitive outside the pocket, but this is probably not the game to do it. And I would imagine they're going to be doing whatever they can from pain management perspective to make sure that he's got full range of motion and can throw the ball as he usually would. So maybe there's some downfield inaccuracy. It's definitely possible if he takes another hit directly to the area that he has some soreness and maybe some limitation. But even though that's a scary term, there's not been any indication that he's actually got a significant lung contusion, or he wouldn't be playing. They wouldn't have allowed him to practice. So, you kind of see this in the same way that you'd see a quarterback with a rib injury. If he takes a hit in the wrong way, there may be some issues, but I think you can trust him to play pretty much his usual role today.
And can we breathe easy if we are thinking about Will Fuller?
Yeah, I think so. Both Fuller and QT are off the injury report now. So both of them played last week. I didn't see any really much limitation with QT at all. Fuller didn't get as many targets as before. I didn't go back to watch the all 22 to see if Fuller was just kind of running some decoy vertical routes or not. But the fact that they're both off the injury report means that you should be able to trust them without too much difficulty. The limiting factor is going to be how comfortable is Deshaun Watson driving the ball downfield.
And Matt, another limiting factor might be Buffalo's defense, which the first week against the Ravens, okay, they got rolled. The first half against the Chargers, they got rolled. Since then, this has been a respectable defense, one that actually slowed down a Titans offense that was rolling until last week. Will Fuller and Kiki Cutie, really Cutie more than Fuller. I wonder if people are just not considering Fuller. These players are creating difficult decisions at wide receiver. Should we break ties in favor of Fuller and or QT, or against them, with those factors Gene mentioned with Watson and the Buffalo defense in mind?
Well, I mean, I think that when you look at the Buffalo defense and who they've faced, and you can see kind of a pattern here when you look at the wide receiver matchups, is that when you had a slot player, Buffalo didn't do as well against slot players. You look at Keenan Allen was 6 for 67. Adam Thielen plays a lot from the slot, and it looks like they just decided to put their best guy, Tre'Davious White, on Stephon Diggs and shut him down. But Thielen had 14 for 105 yards in that game. So I think when teams either moved it around or they had, you look at it from that perspective, I think that you can probably feel good about QT. I think he's the safest one because Fuller is going to deal more with the strength of that defense working deeper. And I think that the weakness of that defense is going to be inexperience in the middle and also limitations in the middle of the field. and QT will get more of those satellite type of looks that I think, they're still going to throw Hopkins' way. I mean, Hopkins is the best tight coverage receiver in the game, possibly. So I think it's one of those situations where really this is about Buffalo's pass rush. Who's Watson going to find open? Who's going to work open the best? And I'm going to say it's QT, even though Fuller has more experience. I'd say QT, even when Will Fuller is more experienced in the NFL, QT is even better than he is in terms of finding openings and zones. That was never really Fuller's game.
And Gene, real quick on this, Micah Hyde, Raphael Bush, any updates on the Bills secondary?
Fully practicing, not listed on the game status report. Good sign. The way Micah Hyde reacted, and I know he can't always put a lot of stock in what goes on the field as far as the initial player reactions, but Hyde has had issues with soft tissue strains that look like they were going to be longer term issues before, but this one looks like it's going to be short lived. Both those guys have been cleared to go.
And we turn the page to the Vikings backfield, Gene. What are they? I mean, I can ask you two layers of this question. One is like, what do you see with the accurate, objective eyes from the outside, and what must the Vikings be seeing to think this is a good idea the way they're handling Dalvin Cook?
I don't know. You're not there. It's just really hard to say, but there wasn't anything that I liked about what Dalvin Cook said this week other than he felt better than he did the week before. But, he's kind of hinting that he's still kind of 80% at best. Even though his practice video looked okay, he was saying that he didn't really test it all that much because he didn't want to risk things. When it's time, he's going to evaluate himself. It's still day to day, all of these sorts of things. The Vikings are going to put him on a snap count. I don't know. It seems like a setup for disaster here. Hopefully that's not what it proves to be, but we're hearing 20 to 25 snaps. How many touches is he going to get as part of that? It's hard to know. How does he do with the first couple of snaps? Does he feel any tightness and decide he needs to shut it down? I think what you hope if you have Dalvin Cook on your team is that he plays a little bit today, doesn't have any setbacks, builds some confidence for next week, and we move on from there. But I'd be crossing most of my fingers and toes that he doesn't have a setback this week to where we're hearing that I'm still not right. And then, there already been a couple of times this year where he's needed a week to recover in between these, limited action type games. And hopefully we're not going through that again.
So, Matt, when we hear about fingers crossed and lots of uncertainty, that clouds a picture against an Arizona run defense that has been eminently beatable on the road. Arizona, their offense is not looking like they're going to necessarily be able to keep up. We know that Riley Reif is going to be out for this game, so that undermines some confidence in the Vikings offense, but at the same time, this feels like a good game script for a running back. We just don't know which running back. Do you try to play out, well, the Vikings are going to look foolish and it's a Latavius Murray, big second half? Do you play out, hey, Dalvin Cook, if you ask him to play, he's going to give it all? Or do you just stay away from the situation today?
I mean, really, because there's so many players that are out on bye this week, that I think that you can find a number of bye week options who might be a little bit more predictable for you than what's going on in the Vikings backfield. So that would be my first choice, is that especially if you're in a PPR league, that evens the balances the scales a little bit more, where you can look at wide receivers and feel like that you're going to get some of those bonuses for targets that they're going to catch. So I would probably stay away from them in all but maybe certain standard leagues where you're in a larger standard league and you need a running back.
Any temptation to try to trade for Dalvin Cook while everybody is down on him?
Not really, just because this team seems to be going by the arm of Kirk Cousins, and it seems to, this could be one of those years where it's if I'm in a dynasty league, yeah, absolutely. But in a redraft league, I think I'm leaving him at the side of the road right now.
Gene, later on tonight, the 3 afternoon games, I mean, hopefully the Rams in Denver can be entertaining in some way. And for someone like yourself, a connoisseur of defensive football, Baltimore and Tennessee should be a good game. Not a lot of entertaining games, but that's okay because we have New England and Kansas City tonight. But New England, we have, at least on the injury report, Bill Belichick injury report, we have to put on our special glasses to see through it. When we put on those glasses, Is there any, because Sony Michel was looking like he's going to be a good play. It's against Kansas City. Rob Gronkowski. This is a week to get Josh Gordon in the lineup. But with the late start, with the injury report statuses, how can you advise us on all of our Patriots?
Your guess is as good as mine with Bill Belichick trying to project what you think is a reasonable game script and game plan for those guys. I am choosing to take this as a good sign with Sony Michel, meaning that the Patriots will really limit the practice of players that they want to be as healthy as possible for game time. So we've seen it with almost every key offensive player with any injury of concern at all, from Gronkowski to Edelman to Hogan this week, who had a little bit of time off for rest and rehab. Tom Brady's been on the injury report, kind of listed as limited and questionable. Josh Gordon, you're kind of seeing the same thing. There's not any indication that Michel's not going to play. And hopefully what this means is they know that he has an issue, as many players do, that they need to manage a little bit. And rather than put him out for any extra practice participation at all, they may as well give him the time to rest and rehab so that he can be as full strength as possible. He was participating all the way into the fourth quarter. His long touchdown run came halfway through the fourth quarter. He had a couple of carries after that. I think he was still on the field with 4 minutes left to go in the game in a 3 touchdown. You could say, well, maybe that means that they don't feel like he's that important. But given what the running back depth chart looks like right now, that's who they needed to put on the field in that situation. I think the bigger issue for him is James White looks amazing. They continue to find ways to get him open in the offense and use him until Edelman and Hogan and Gronkowski are healthy enough to play those roles a little bit more too. But with as well as White is playing right now, it's hard to see Michel getting a huge complement of snaps. But you're right. If they choose to, you mentioned the Kansas City defense, but that back seven is, you can attack that with your running backs in different ways too. So maybe they continue to do what they've done with James White. I don't have any sense of it. It seems like it would be a good game for Michel, but I don't think you can trust that at all. But from an injury standpoint, I don't think you have to be concerned about him.
And the Patriots haven't made a move since picking up Kenyon Barner. So I think if they expected to be without Michel going into this game with just White and Barner at running back, might not be wise. Matt, on Thursday night, we talked about simulating Bill Belichick from a defensive standpoint and maybe devoting more energy to Tyreek Hill, making Patrick Mahomes put together longer drives, which points towards more volume for Kareem Hunt or Travis Kelce in the middle of the field against those slow Patriots linebackers, and of course, Sammy Watkins. What about simulating the offensive side for the Patriots against the Chiefs? As I said, a lot of people, and when people are asking me questions about Josh Gordon this week, Matt, I've got to pause because it's not that hard to picture Josh Gordon having 4 for 140 and 2 touchdowns on like 20 snaps and 10 routes run in this game. It's not hard to picture Rob Gronkowski having one of his 9 for 180 and 2 touchdown games in the middle of the field against the Chiefs. It was how Jesse James did against them. Jeff Hireman was running free in the middle of the field against them at one point. So what angle do we pick on the Patriots offense tonight?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's really all angles, and I think that you would pick pretty much everybody in this situation, because the only thing that I would say is that if you have receivers in the Patriots offense who only run straight line go routes up the sideline, forget them. Just forget them. Let them go, because Philip Dorsett to me is an example of that, maybe on a certain level where they're going to isolate him to a side and maybe have him do some of that, or you get some short crossers. But it's the guys who can make the really big plays in the middle of the field, who are going to run these deeper crosses, slant routes, post routes, and that might be a little bit better for Brady, where he's not having to make as many power deep throws, because Brady just doesn't have the arm anymore to deliver the way that he once did to Randy Moss. I mean, and that's the thing, is when people say, oh, they're getting a Randy Moss type back. Oh, well, they got rid of Brandon Cooks for a reason. And the reason is, in my opinion, from what I've seen on tape, is that Tom Brady could not reach Brandon Cooks, and Brandon Cooks could not win in tight coverage to make those catches. Josh Gordon is like, basically, just throw it near me and I'll shove the little twerp out of the way. So it's one of those situations where I think you look at Gordon and you got to play him. You look at Gronkowski and you know that he's going to some of the things they're going to do is going to confuse some of these linebackers. That's going to work. The most improved area of the Chiefs defense is really the stopping the run from what I've seen over the past couple of weeks. And it still hasn't been great, but they've gotten better at it. At least they're not getting run over in some of the ways that they were earlier in the season. And then also just some of their safety play coming over to the perimeter and crashing down on some of these guys with their safeties, helping out in coverage. But that middle of the field is still very exploitable. And that means, on one hand, they're going to give the ball enough to Michelle that you'll feel good about that. They're probably going to, they're going to give highly leveraged targets to Gronkowski and Gordon, and that should be good. And then maybe you hope and pray that Cordero Patterson gets a red zone target on a screen pass, or he can take one of his targets and run through the show like the chicken does through Family Guy, and then you're good.
If you think you have this angle figured out for tonight's game,
good luck.
Yeah, right. If you think you've got the angle figured out for tonight's game, you can take advantage of it playing free daily fantasy football thanks to our partnership with DraftKings. Play for free for a share of $1 million with a first deposit of $5 or more. First prize, $100,000. Get your full lineup in. Watch your team shoot up the leaderboard. Make sure you get all your picks in about 2.5 hours, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today, Sunday, October 14th, go to dkng.co/footballguys to draft your lineup. Again, that's dkng.co/footballguys. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for more details. Gene, the hits keep coming. I mean, we're keeping you busy. You're such a good sport this year because we keep having these things come up midweek that are the most difficult to predict. Another one, Isaiah Crowell and the now robust Jets running game. This is not trivial because you're thinking about Crowell because he's pretty hot coming into this game. But even if he's active, does it limit his effectiveness? Does this make Bilal Powell almost a must play against the Colts, who are getting back Darius Leonard and Anthony Walker this week? What's our best forecast for the Jets running game before the inactives come out?
I think Crowell is going to be okay. I don't have a lot of concern with him. I was surprised about the DNP on Thursday. Going back and reviewing his game, he looked fine. He had a 36-yard run at his last play of the game where he cut hard on both ankles. There wasn't any unusual or awkward tackle to end that play. It being kind of a big game for him where he didn't have many touches, but he was still a fairly busy player in that game. It's not too unusual to have him just sort of rest on Wednesday, and he was just being called sore on Wednesday. So the Thursday DNP was a little bit unusual, but was able to get back to practice on Friday. No concern overnight from Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport that there's going to be any issues. Bilal Powell is there, so if there is a little bit more soreness, it may be adrenaline, and the game kind of kept him through all the way through the fourth quarter last week. If that becomes an issue, you will see a little bit more Powell. But I think this is a situation where, the plan would be, the expectation could be that he's going to see his usual workload, and then they'll kind of reevaluate from there.
And on the other side of that, speaking of adrenaline, can adrenaline help Eric Ebron get through all of his maladies today? And is there any truth to the rumor that you called him out? No, just kidding.
Yeah, I did joke a little bit on Thursday night that the number of ailments you have is inversely proportional to the severity of your condition. Just sort of jokingly, and the hope was then that we'd see him return to a full practice on Friday, and that's what happened. There are a couple of pretty plugged-in Indianapolis Colts beat writers right now. They didn't express any concern with Ebron this week. We've seen him play through injury in the past. I think they did list him questionable after all, which the Colts tend to do fairly frequently, but I think, each one of those things could become an issue for him as the game progresses, but they all sounded like aches and pains and bumps and bruises and banged up type situation rather than one particular injury that's likely to be aggravated or limited.
He gave him a blue tom-tom, and it was
a sticker. You want a sticker? Oh man!
But we could have turned his tables on you today with those people who within those dumb talk show things that the masses watch, which is we could turn the thing on you when you talked about how it was a boring game, but Gene appreciates defensive efforts. I wanted to do that dumb talk show host thing and say, are you saying Gene's boring?
Gene likes boring things. But defense isn't boring. Well, Baltimore, Tennessee, I mean, we saw lots of good Steve McNair, Ray Lewis kind of matchups, but the Jets and the Colts, Matt, today, isn't not going to resemble that kind of game. And in fact, I think this is the sleeper shootout of the day, potentially, more because of Andrew Luck and because of the weapons and the balance in the Jets offense. Well, balance last week. So we talked on Thursday night about the Colts and some of the angles to try to vacuum up some of the value of Andrew Luck's passing volume. What about the Jets? Because we can forecast a game where Andrew Luck is successful enough to get Sam Darnold to throw the ball, I don't know, let's go crazy, 30 times, which means Quincy Enunwa is a better play, which means Robbie Anderson has more of a shot to get deep against the Colts' no-name corners. But it also could be another game where they run the ball 40 or 45 times. Your man Bilal Powell, like Energizer Bunny, still going. Isaiah Crowell, you're trying to time the good weeks. We haven't been able to do that. Maybe 2 good weeks in a row. What are your angles on the Jets' offense today?
I think Isaiah Crowell's a must start. And I think after watching him against the Broncos last week, and also then watching him against Cleveland and Detroit, what you see, the Jets are trying to run outside on defenses with both Powell and Crowell. And what they're trying to do is establish a soft edge, which is basically manipulating the defense or finding ways that when they line up against a defense that's playing pass and with their cornerback or safety off the line of scrimmage, they try to run it outside, and they've been very successful. They killed the Broncos last week doing that, and they found ways throughout the year to manipulate that with a variety of different looks. They like to run a lot from tight bunch sets with trips where it looks like a passing play and it gets the corner to play off a little bit, and then they end up running it. Or they use motion to shift across to get a corner sent to another side. That manipulates the personnel counts and then allows them to run to a side where they have an advantage. And Crowell is the more explosive player than Powell. So if Crowell's going to play and everything's good, then they're virtually a 50-50 split, and they're used exactly the same in terms of down and distance, in terms of quarter, with the exception of the second quarter. Powell seems to get more carries in the second quarter. But in terms of, where they are located on the field, 50-50 split. This is essentially a true committee. The only difference is that Crowell's a better player in terms of being able to break tackles and get downfield and flip the field for you as an explosive runner. So if they're going to play, Powell's kind of your low-end flex play. Go for that. If they're going to, and then you have Crowell, who has a chance to be a running back 1 this week. And the safeties are out this week. They're starting, one of their starting safeties in Indianapolis is out, and it's a weak secondary. So they're not going to need that many opportunities to really work out in the deep game. And that's going to work well with some of the play action that they run. So I'd say that I agree with you that this could be a shootout, but I also think that it's more of a game where the Jets are going to have a very balanced attack, and you're going to get big plays from the ground game and in the passing game.
And would the Giants be better off with Isaiah Crowell and Sam Darnold than Eli Manning and Saquon Barkley?
They'd be better off with the Jets offensive line. and that's really what it is. I mean, because Brian Baldinger hit it on the head. If you're not watching Baldy's breakdowns in addition to everybody else who does, video stuff on Twitter, then you're missing out, because one of the things that he showed is just how lax some of the offensive line play has been in terms of double teams. Like, he's just showing simple things like step forward when you go to attack somebody, don't step to the side, and showing the difference of when they did that right, what happened, or instead of giving them a chicken wing and just doing this when you're supposed to double team, actually double team the guy and then go to the next one. And there were he showed like numerous instances of that, and that led to a lot of those 1-yard plays that Saquon Barkley has right now. The credit to Barkley right now should be that he's taking a lot of those 1-yard gains and not trying to lose like 5 or 10 and doing the Marquise Lee shuffle that, was common to Lee whenever he had the ball in his hands, even though it's a different position. But I mean, that's the issue.
Yeah, and coming soon to fantasy football, knowing the 32 offensive line coaches, because truly, I don't know if any offensive line coach, Gene, could help Washington today. This is another one where it might be easier for you to just tell us who's healthy in that offense than who's banged up. Who's going to actually take the field for Washington at running back and wide receiver today?
Well, they've ruled out Chris Thompson. They've ruled out Jamison Crowder, so those guys won't be on the field. I would be worried that Josh Doxson, if he is on the active roster, is going to be pretty limited with his ongoing heel issues. He really wasn't able to do much last week and was inactive. Did a little bit more practice in this week, but really wasn't seen to be moving very well. They've not been, for all the discussion about Washington, he's not been ruled out. So there's a chance he's active, but I don't think you can trust him. Paul Richardson is now dealing with some knee soreness on top of the shoulder issues that he's had since the preseason. But they've always managed his practice reps and then allowed him to play. And even though he got a little bit less practice time into this week than he has in previous weeks, he should be active, and I think he's going to be relatively healthy. Jordan Reed has been okay there. Vernon Davis has been on the injury report with a hamstring strain, but he's going to go. Adrian Peterson, shoulder dislocation last week. What looked like a pretty violent knee hyperextension, had his knee wrapped pretty significantly earlier in the week, and then had an MRI and a specialist visit for a shoulder. Everything seemed to check out well enough that he was moving pretty well by the end of the week, and he's going to play. If Chris Thompson was healthy, I don't know that you'd see much Adrian Peterson because he's got a lot of issues in both of those situations, the knee and the shoulder. If you get hit or tackled the wrong way, could crop up at any time. So his availability and his effectiveness is going to depend on how the first few series go, if that. So I think you're going to see Peterson and Richardson, of all those guys, likely play the most number of snaps. Whether we see a little bit more Capri Bibbs or some other players kind of filling in from the back end remains to be seen. But hopefully those will be the guys along with Jordan Reed that they'll be able to rely on.
And this, I can't remember who brought it up on Twitter this morning. A beat writer brought it up that this is a good moment to say that Frank Gore hasn't missed a game since 2011, I think. That's just Frank Gore. He's in my Hall of Fame. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here laughing because I'm looking at our staff roster league, and I have Peterson and Gore, with Devonta Freeman out, and I'm sitting here going, should I even think about starting these two guys, and when I watch Adrian Peterson, the way Gene describes him, I feel like I'm watching the last Logan movie, where, so
it's just when Adrian Peterson retires, or I should say the first year that the season passes by and no one signs him, he's just going to turn to dust. It's just like poof, and go back to the dimension that he came from, because obviously the dude was born to play football, as was Frank Gore. So Matt, are we going to get clever, tricky in DFS or deeper leagues with someone like Capri Bibbs, with someone like Maurice Harris? Is it Jordan Reed week finally, or is the better answer here with Alex Smith coming in off the worst game I've seen him play in a long time? Short week, going home, that this is almost going to be like a extended practice for Carolina's defense. Maybe the answer is Carolina's defense. Any clever angles on the second team Washington offense?
Other than Maurice Harris, no. And only it's because I think Maurice Harris can sneak by some people and do something where they're caught napping. And I think that's essentially it. Or he can get matched up against the worst cornerback on Carolina. Whereas I think the middle of the field is going to be pretty stout. I mean, Thomas Davis is back. And so, he's always been a savvy pass defender, and that helps out a lot. And he's someone that can blitz, and he can do it all. So, that's another guy that when he retires, he's going to go to that netherworld until they summon some more football players and they want to sprinkle some of that dust back on the newborns, but that's that knowing that, I would say, yeah, this is an extended practice for the Carolina team, and the coach will blow the whistle and jerk the neck at, play mild Woody Hayes, millennial Woody Hayes on some of these cornerbacks, after they give up a long play to Harris, but that'll be about it.
Since you mentioned it, I was already thinking this, but folks out there encourage us to go that deep. You said sprinkle, and my brain went, oh yeah, my hobby, deep tight end plays. No, we're not going to talk about Eric Swope, although hopefully you added him in deeper leagues. What about sprinkle? Because I want to say, who was it? Jordan Reed. One of the Washington players was saying Sprinkle needs to get more work. And we start to project a year or two down the line. And plus Clayton Gray, One Nation Under Hog. We've got to talk about really quickly, what does the RSP have to say about Jeremy Sprinkle's possibility of being fantasy relevant at some point in his career?
Oh, absolutely is. And he's one of the best blockers on the team for them at that position right now. He's an absolute keep. And he's someone that if he's sitting on a deep dynasty waiver wire, you have a deep roster, 30, 40 players, you definitely want to add him. And if you have practice squad rules that give you 2 years or 3 years, you definitely want him sitting there.
Gene, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Will it be snowing touchdown passes
in Miami?
In Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp's direction in Denver today?
Hopefully. That would be nice. I don't think there's any concern with those guys. They progressed as smoothly through the return to play protocol as you would hope. Taken off the injury report even on Friday. Both should play. Hopefully no setbacks.
So, Matt, we can turn back the clock about a year and a half ago, and you were one of the few voices saying there is still something there with Jared Goff, and we fast forward, and it's been quite a run and quite a show. Jared Goff, California, I think he played last year and threw 4 touchdowns and 300 yards against Tennessee in about 40-degree weather. Do you have any hesitation at all playing Jared Goff in the snow and cold? Probably not so much snow, not so much wind, but cold this week in Denver.
No, because I mean, he's dealt with cold weather before. I mean, I would say, I know that the Northwest is kind of mild at times, for their winters, but still, I mean, I wouldn't look at this as a crazy situation unless we had to deal with lots of snow and lots of wind. That would be more of the issue there. Now, has he played in the altitude? Has this offense played in the altitude before? And I don't think the answer is yes. So that might be a little bit of an issue for them. But this team has played so well thus far that I wouldn't downgrade them over things like that unless you're choosing between him and Patrick Mahomes. Then
if you've been listening to Matt, that's probably who you're choosing.
Yeah, because I've told you basically it was him, Mahomes, and Rivers. You can get 2 of those 3 in every draft this summer, and so if you did that, you're sitting pretty, and you're looking at those minuscule little things. And if you are, then you consider Mahomes or Rivers, and that's about it.
Gene, let's talk a little defense. I didn't mention, Baltimore, Tennessee, harkens back to the McNair and Ray Lewis matchups. Chicago, Miami has now gone all the way to the opposite spectrum, unless you like snuff films or something from the 1985 Titanic matchup. The third game this afternoon, and it's actually the Rams and Denver is the second afternoon game. The third afternoon game is Jacksonville and Dallas, which really could be one like cue the Benny Hill theme. But part of the reason we were thinking that was the Dallas pass rush, which has been very underrated this year against Blake Bortles. We got their linebackers against TJ Yeldon. But then we learned something about DeMarcus Lawrence this week, or maybe not learned, but got some more detail. In the IDP leagues, everybody out there playing IDP fantasy football, it's the only real fantasy football. What do we forecast with DeMarcus Lawrence's impact on the Jags this week and going forward, knowing what we know about his shoulder?
Well, I don't know if it was just, a response to him not playing particularly well last week against Houston, or something that had really it begun bothering him more than what it had. But he said he's got a labral tear that he's been playing through painfully for a couple of years. And the concern with that is that it's likely means that he's got an unstable shoulder that may, pop in and out at any point. It probably needs to be fixed, but he's chose not to do so before. So I think this week is going to be pretty important. Jacksonville's offensive line has a number of struggles. Most of their guys are playing, but they're out. They're not 2 top tackles, but 2 of their 3 top tackles, with Josh Wells going on injured reserve with a groin injury this week to follow Cam Robinson's ACL tear earlier in the year. Andrew Norwell's been kind of dealing with foot issues as they go. So I think we're going to find out this week whether or not it's going to be more of an issue or not. And it's Jeremy Parnell that's been dealing with the stuff at the tackle position. Norwell and Linder have been dealing with inside offensive line difficulties. So, contacting the offensive line with your shoulder, long arm out, those sorts of things can put some stress on that situation. And if he has a setback pain wise, he said he was feeling better during the week, then, maybe we see him continue to, I don't think we're on the verge of hearing that he's going to have season ending surgery or anything, but maybe we see him continue to struggle a bit. So we'd like to see him play well today and get back on the bandwagon that he had. I think we're 4.5, maybe 5 sacks that he had. He went 1 3-sack week just a couple of weeks ago. So I think it was maybe just a response to a tough game against Houston, that last second loss, and hopefully not much more than that.
And hopefully he gets paid playing on the franchise tag this year. Hopefully this doesn't interfere with his ability to get paid next year. Matt, our fantasy team's getting paid. One of the matchups we haven't talked about, gotten in depth, it's really interesting. At this time of year, especially in the AFC, where the 5th and 6th and some of the divisions always seem up for grabs. The Chargers-Browns game really feels like it could be a springboard game for one of these teams and a loss that smarts for the other. And likewise with our fantasy teams, we want to get the momentum going. Let's take each side of this. Let's start with the Charger side. Because you go back and watching every game, it's impossible to miss Denzel Ward playing outstanding. You have this new Chargers blueprint of Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. You also have Myles Garrett, Larry Ogunjobi. You have a really stout front line for the Browns. You mentioned Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is a quarterback that is bold, but often disciplined. So obviously we're playing Melvin Gordon. Is this a week where you break ties in favor of Phillip Rivers? Is this a week where we maybe see an increased role with Austin Eckler? What do you foresee as the Chargers travel east in an early game at the resurgent Browns?
Well, with the offensive line getting healthier, and that's been a big issue for them, I think that they may go deep a little bit more often now because earlier in the year they weren't able to, sustain some of that pass protection that they needed. So guys like Mike Williams maybe weren't as in play as you would have liked to have seen both the Williams receivers really along with Keenan Allen. But when they were healthier, you could see that they were trying to throw a little bit deeper in this, and that meant that Eckler wasn't maybe the ceiling of potential wasn't there for Eckler. But then in recent weeks, they with them being out, they could go a little bit more often to him. I think what you're going to see is that you see a slight bump for guys like Mike Williams and Terrell Williams if you're looking at guys like Alan Hearns and Mo Harris and guys like that during this injury fest and bye week start. And then those are guys who are there. But I think that you'll also you just look at Rivers as a very strong start. Gordon is going to be his typical high carry, low yardage, goal line look with maybe with some love in the passing game. But this is a pretty good Browns linebacking core. And I could see where if there's going to be some turnovers here, it's going to be passes towards Gordon and Eckler, where like guys like Kirksey and Schobert are able to, make some plays and undercut, or Jamie Collins to be able to make some plays on these guys. So I'd give a little less love to the running backs. Not enough that you're going to overreact to anything there unless you're looking at them as tiebreaker situations. And so there's a little bit less love to them, a little bit more love to some of these, secondary receivers behind Keenan Allen.
Since he mentioned it, Gene, sometimes when we're looking for some injury news on the Chargers, it's like waiting for the Pony Express. Did the Pony show up with any little note about the tackles this morning?
No, nothing. I got nothing.
Yeah, well, so we'll watch that with Russell Okung and Joe Barksdale. On the other side, Matt, I got to say, because I report this every week, went back and watched Baker Mayfield on Friday. I was impressed. Impressed with the timing and accuracy of his passes. And Rashard Higgins is going to be out. So Antonio Callaway and they got Rashad Perryman. We're not going to talk about Rashard Perryman, though, but Jarvis Landry hasn't been exploding like we thought. Improve this quarterback, improve his numbers. David Njoku, there's talk. I mean, this guy, you talk about trust. Just he's already developing. Is this a week that you can trust some of the parts of the Browns passing game?
Well, I think you probably have already been trusting Baker Mayfield because, and I had this conversation yesterday with Gene Clemens on my podcast where we talked about Baker Mayfield because we had actually both watched together in an RSP film room Baker Mayfield and Rashad Perryman, and weren't impressed with either one really at that stage of when we were watching them. But I think that Mayfield is developing into that, good Jeff Garcia type of player. He's decisive. I think that he's being aggressive. He's been able to buy time to a degree, and as Gene pointed out, that the offense actually is geared towards him, and that they're excited about using him in ways that they applied that to Tyrod Taylor, and that wasn't really Tyrod Taylor's game. And that certain things that they didn't apply to Tyrod Taylor, they're applying to Baker Mayfield. So you could, and when you look at it from that standpoint, You might say, well, it's kind of like as he said, kind of like the Jalen Hurts, Tua type of thing, where last year Hurts had a coordinator who didn't really want Hurts in the lineup. He wanted his prized recruit, pro style quarterback. When they put the pro style quarterback into the pro style offense that didn't match Hurts, everything took off. Now they have an offense coordinator who likes both guys. Both guys are playing well at Alabama. I think this was the same situation. So I look at this and I'd say Baker Mayfield is good, but I think people are there's too much. I'm trying to tell everybody that I did pick him as the next Drew Brees, and they're trying to anoint the Drew Brees crown. And the ifs are, do they have a receiver who's worth a darn other than Javaris Landry? And I'd say not really. They don't. Do they have a tight end who's crossed that threshold into being a great player? No. Njoku has had moments, and I love Njoku's game as a receiver, but he's had moments. He still drops passes. He's still not a great route runner. There's still work to be done there. There's still enough ifs in this offense that I would say this. For the next few games, yeah, he's a good matchup. Go ahead. But when you hear the narrative of, is he ready to be crowned, be the prince of quarterbacks that is gonna become the king? No, because the king's already been crowned.
Mm-hmm.
But
his hair looks kind of like a crown too.
Yeah, it does kind of look like a crown or a mushroom cloud. But there's at the same time, it's one of those situations where he can be a good quarterback, but I would not go and start buying all in on Baker Mayfield, all in on Browns. It's still a step-by-step thing here. And don't let Browns fans fool you, because I am one. They are prone to highs and lows. In August of last year, you would have thought Deshaun Kaiser was going to be the king of quarterbacks. And by, this time this year, they wanted to basically put a hole and bury him alive. And that's how Browns fans are, because we've been through so much that they have this mentality of overreacting to everything. So don't listen to Browns fans. Don't listen to Browns writers. Sorry, guys. Just keep it an even keel with them.
Gene, who would win a popularity contest among the Brits this week? Marshawn Lynch, John Gruden, or Russell Wilson?
Come on. ¿Quién es más macho? It's my son.
Of course. He cuts. It's like Muhammad Ali speaking of the king. I would think that Marshawn Lynch's personality cuts across all cultures, all languages. When that dude it's like Santa Claus. When that dude shows up, everybody knows the good times are about to begin. But Matt, on the Oakland side, Marshawn Lynch can still play. A lot of people out there saying Amari Cooper can still play. Do they play for our fantasy teams against the Seahawks, who Jared Goff and Todd Gurley ran the Seahawks ragged last week? But this is Oakland with two rookie tackles, without Kelechi Osemele, with a team that's swirling down the drain. Do we want a part of their offense in our lineup?
Not if you don't want, unless you have no choice. But I would say Marshawn Lynch is your best choice, in the sense that young offensive linemen can still run block. I mean, that's if they're decent run blockers in the first place, they're going to be decent run blockers, in the pros. It's the pass game that's the biggest issue and the biggest jump for them. So Marshawn Lynch should be fine. If you're looking at him and Sony Michel, at this stage, you might still lean Marshawn Lynch in this game. I mean, I'm kind of looking in those, and that's the one what I'm trying to have as a tiebreaker at this stage. Then the rest of it is, you just kind of wonder. You look at who's going to have the most success in the middle of the field. It's not going to be Amari Cooper, because they like to put him outside and have him run double moves and wonder what the heck's going on with him. I would just Amari Cooper doesn't sniff my lineup right now. Martavis Bryant, if he weren't sick, I would be starting him ahead of Cooper, just because he's been getting a little bit more love lately. Jordy Nelson has been a wide receiver 3. And he's, and you look at what the Seahawks are usually weak at, and it's crossing routes over the middle against cover 3. And Jordy Nelson's one of the best at being able to find open zones. So I would say that if you're in that, again, he's at the top of your flex play bye week option list right now in terms of guys. So it's really the Cook Lynch show with a dash of Jordy Nelson, and the rest you just kind of hold your nose and tell them to stay away.
And on the Seattle side, Matt, as our parting shot here, you suffered through the bad old days when Russell Wilson was showing skills and abilities to make him a good fantasy quarterback, but the volume and game plans weren't there. And lo and behold, Brian Schottenheimer has been successful at running the ball when they know we're going to run. They have 3 good running backs. I have no doubt that Rashad Penny. This is where one of those weird fantasy football moments where if Rashad Penny's being dropped across leagues, this is where you go pick him up because with their commitment to the run and how effectively they're running the ball, he could be a league winner if Chris Carson, who's been hurt how many times in his career already, Mike Davis, who's been hurt how many times in his career already. But where this makes our heads hurt, Matt, is whether to play Russell Wilson or whether to play Tyler Lockett or whether to play Doug Baldwin. Because watching the game last week, what Russell Wilson did produce was extending plays and really pulling a rabbit out of the hat, but not so much there was one play action bomb to Tyler Lockett. But this team seems like back to the bad old days in Russell Wilson fantasy football terms. They're content to throw the ball only 20 times if that's all they have to do. So what do you do with the pieces of the Seattle passing game today in a game that we think they should be able to win pretty comfortably?
I like the bad old days because even in the bad old days, Russell Wilson in the second half of the season was a top 12 quarterback, even in the bad old days. And this feels that way. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I think I was writing about that if there's a guy you want to pick up, it's him because pretty much every year he's played like a top 5 to top 8 quarterback down the second half of the season once they make adjustments and figure out what they're going to do this year with everything around them. And I think they figured that out. They figured out that they can run, that the offensive line has gotten better. That helps the play action pass. Doug Baldwin's been hurt. Brandon Marshall drops lots of passes and he's getting older. And they figured out, okay, we can use Lockett. We can use these 2 running backs and we're going to get a little bit of a bump when Doug Baldwin comes back and we'll be good to go. So I'd say, yeah, if you're in a situation where you're looking at Russell Wilson and you're considering him, I wouldn't have too many doubts about him. I'd feel good about this. And I think that you'll just see it as more of a, deep passing game right now where he's going to try and take more shots off of those play action looks.
And thank you to the NFL for moving the London start back to the time of the rest of the game. So it's not a chaotic morning for us having to watch a game over our shoulder.
And everybody about the people in England, right?
Hey, Chad Kahn for one, the Jags. No, and there's lots of great NFL fans. There's folks on our staff that are over in the UK and Ireland. I don't want to make anybody unhappy, and that seems it could be. I know Brexit is coming up, so I don't know what's going to happen there. We got to redraw some borders here. But the
NFL's already making those guys yell who yell about running backs anyway, right? They just yell. So all right. I like hearing them yell whenever running backs are actually still running backs and they matter.
They're still relevant. So anyway, as I always want to just give a tip of the cap to the great NFL fan base and overseas and kind of like jazz, people that appreciate some American products more than Americans. We appreciate
running backs don't matter.
Yeah. The running back is like the good rhythm section. Actually, the offensive line's the rhythm section. This is now it's 10:03 here in Austin, so I should probably because now we're getting off on the tangent where we're gonna go and go. Yeah, exactly. Next time that Matt's on the couch, we're just gonna dedicate. We're gonna all talk about it in all football and all jazz terms. And folks, you indulge us. You let us do things like this. And in addition to helping support what we do at Football Guys, all of the great Football Guys staff and everything they're turning out for you. Simon Shepard, if you've enjoyed the Draft Dominator app, then you've enjoyed the product of an overseas English NFL fan. So thank you, everybody, for supporting what we do, giving us the opportunity to do this through equipment malfunctions, and enjoy your week 6 and enjoy this great week of football. And we have the main event tonight, New England and Kansas City, and lots of great things along the way. We like being part of that journey for you always because you're so classy.